Good morning. I'm Claire Schleicher. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a member of our board of directors. Welcome to White Bear Unitarian Universalist Church. We are a community of youth, adults, and children of many diverse theologies, held together by covenant, not creed. And together we share the values of courage, reverence, and compassion. Welcome especially to our visitors. We are so glad you're here. May you know deep welcome and belonging in this place. We encourage that welcome by asking everyone to wear a name tag. To share a request for today's meditation, please place it in the chat box before the opening hymn or add it to our meditation bowl. Please gain consent before you use someone's full name. The meditation bowl is in the Soul Work Center over here, along with some activities to help people of all ages engage with today's service. Today, after this service, please join us for an artist meet and greet where you can meet Marie Panlener, the artist whose works are currently displayed on our walls. Feel free to let her know how much you appreciate her work. We are also hosting a membership 2 class today at 12:30 p.m. in the Wheatley Room. If you're curious to learn more about the church and meet other people who are new or newish to the church, please come. And this Wednesday, you are invited to join us for supper at 5:30 p.m. Afterwards, we'll be hosting our choir rehearsal, the parent circle, and outdoor games for anyone over 5 years old. Nursery care is provided for kiddos 4 and under. We are seeking volunteers for our annual Habitat for Humanity project. For years, WBUUC has partnered with Habitat for Humanity, an organization that believes that everyone deserves a home, and are advocates for affordable homeownership and racial equality in Twin Cities housing. This year, our building project will take place from July 22nd to the 25th in Minneapolis. No building experience is necessary. You must be 18 years or older, although 16 or 17-year-olds can participate with adult supervision. Jeff Ranta coordinates this project for WBUUC. His contact information is in the e-news, and you can speak with him today at the Habitat table in the social hall. Woohoo! Please join us for our Earth Day concert with Peter Mayer on Monday, April 22nd. It is only $30 and tickets are on sale now. Seating is general admission. The doors will open at 6:30 and the concert will start at 7. Light refreshments will be available. The ticket link is in the e-news or on the website. And please join us for a very special Earth Day Sunday service. Our pledge drive officially ended last Sunday, but we're still accepting pledges. Please let the board know what you plan to give toward our next fiscal year so that we can plan accordingly. Our team of pledge callers has begun to make calls and send out messages to everyone who has yet to pledge. So we hope to hear by all of you by April 22nd at the latest, so then we can finalize this next year's budget. Thank you in advance for your help with this. So ends our announcements. Welcome to our church. Together, we grow our souls and serve the world in love.
Come in. Come into this place which we make holy by our presence. Come in with all your vulnerabilities and strengths, fears and anxieties, loves and hopes, for here you need not hide, nor pretend, nor be anything other than who you are and who you are called to be. Come into this place where we can touch and be touched, heal and be healed, forgive and be forgiven. Come into this place where the ordinary is sanctified, the human is celebrated, the compassionate is expected. Come into this place. Together, we make it a holy place. My name is Amy, and my pronouns are she, her.
My name is Kat Formby, and I use any pronouns. Last year, I studied abroad in Germany for 11 months. When I arrived in Germany, I spoke very little German and had never traveled that far away from my family. I attended a German high school, lived with the German host family, and immersed myself completely in German culture. Despite this complete immersion, some of my most transformative education came from more practical experiences, such as a rather memorable train journey. Before I moved to Germany, I didn't have a lot of experience with public transportation. One afternoon, I needed to go to the nearest big city on an errand. I really wanted to go by myself. I decided to stop at a museum too, make a day out of it. I didn't actually have a cell phone contract or working cell service yet, only Wi-Fi capability on my phone. As I was leaving my house, I remember looking at my portable phone charger and thinking, I don't need that. I don't even have cell service. Later that day, when it came time to go back home, I realized I had somehow ended up at a different train station than the one that I had planned to catch my return train from. No problem, I thought. This train will probably go back to my train station, so I should just board here. This proved to be a critical error. As I boarded the train, I realized that my phone had very low battery. I frantically tried to check and make sure I was on the correct train, but right then, my phone died. I was worried that I was on the wrong train, but I thought that even when I was on the right train. I sat there, anxiously, through what was supposed to be a 25-minute journey. An hour later, the train was still going through unfamiliar territory. I was uncomfortable talking to strangers, especially in German, but I finally asked the person sitting next to me which city we were approaching. Aalen was the answer. Whenever I tell this story to my German friends, they always ask in surprise, Aalen? Because Aalen is ridiculously far from my host family's house. I was so far from home that if I had been traveling west instead of east, I would have been in France already. Another stranger overheard this conversation and offered to loan me a phone charger for the last few minutes of the ride so that I could at least call my host family and tell them where I was. I called my host family and explained the situation. They told me which trains I could take to get back from Aalen. I got off and ran to get on the first train. When I got back to the city, I ate the worst onion rings I've ever had while I waited for my right train. I boarded my last train and finally relaxed, but to my surprise, we never arrived in my town. I had to ask yet another person, am I on the wrong train? I was. This stranger took the time to explain to me that I had gotten on the train with the right number, but going in the wrong direction. I got off this train at the next stop, and the panic really started to set in. My phone was dead, I was alone, it was dark, and my host parents had said that they would meet me at the station, and I had no way to contact them to tell them that I wouldn't be there. Suddenly, I remembered that the student ID I had in my wallet had the emergency contact number for my exchange organization. I asked to use yet another stranger's phone and called the number. The person who answered the emergency line took the time out of their night to call my host family for me, explain why I was so late, and calculate how far away I still was. I needed the help of multiple people throughout that night, most of whom I had never met before in my life. With everyone's help, I finally got on the right train. In the end, my 25-minute journey took about 5 hours and 4 trains. That train journey turned out to be one of the most transformative experiences during my entire time in Germany. I learned that sometimes you not only have to talk to strangers, but rely on them for help. I also learned to never travel without a portable phone charger. My church community here at WBUUC, filled with both friends and some people I've yet to meet, provides myself and my family with the kind of support system we need, especially in difficult times. By showing up for our church community, we can be that same kind of support for others. I light this chalice for the power of community and transformative learning.
I'm Reverend Jack Gady, and my pronouns are he, him. Please join me in the opening words. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Please rise and embody your spirit for our opening hymn, number 1007 in the Teal hymnal, There's a River Flowing in My Soul. I'd like to invite all the children and youth forward for our story time. Children, youth, and those young at heart. This story this morning is called Kisa Gotami and the Mustard Seed, and it's adapted from Sarah Conover. I wonder if you can actually help me say it. Kisa Gotami. Beautiful. So long ago, there was a young mother, who had a 2-year-old son. He delighted her, and she loved him deeply. She loved everything about her baby: his laughter, his cries, his grasping fingers, and his cute little toes. But one day, her baby grew sick and died. Kisa was overwhelmed by sadness. She bundled the baby in warm blankets and held him tightly to her chest. Overwhelmed with grief, she stumbled from house to house, begging for medicine that would bring him back to life. But instead of helping, people mocked her. "How can a person be brought back to life?" they jeered. Hours later, Kisa Gotami stood in the street, wretched and sobbing. A kind person led her to the monastery, where she found the Buddha teaching. From the edge of the crowd, Kisa shouted, "Teacher, teacher, I am desperate. Please, my son needs your medicine." The crowd made way for Kisa to reach the Buddha. As she stood before him, he observed the child's lifeless face. You did well in coming here for medicine, Gautami, said the Buddha. Here you will find the help you need. But there is one ingredient I lack for the medicine you need. You must return to the city and find a single mustard seed and bring it to me. Do you know what a mustard seed is? They're little tiny, tiny, tiny seeds. When you crush them, they make mustard, which some people have on their hot dogs. Yeah, it's also referenced in the Babysitters Club. That's good to know. Most important of all, said the Buddha, the mustard seed must be from a family in which no one has died. Go now, make the rounds of the city and ask at every home, bring me back just one mustard seed from such a family. At the very first house Kisa stopped, an old woman answered. She easily gave Kisa Gautami a mustard seed. All India used them in cooking. But just as she received the mustard seed in her hand, she remembered the Buddha's further instructions. Oh, pardon me, but before I take this, I must ask you, has anyone died in this family recently? The old woman's head lowered. She fell silent. When she raised her face, there were tears in her eyes. I'm sorry to say the answer is yes, replied the old woman. My dear husband died 6 months ago. I am so sorry, said Kisa Gautami. Thank you for your kindness, but I cannot take this seed. A few minutes later, she knocked at the door of a house with children running in and out in play. A young woman saw Kisa and came to greet her. Can I help you? She asked. I have been sent to find special medicine for my son. I am looking for a single mustard seed from a household in which no one has died, says Kisa. We cannot help you, I'm sorry. We lost our mother 2 years ago, stated the young woman quietly. For many months, I was so unhappy I didn't know how to go on. One of the boys, her brothers, reached up to hold her hand. She clasped his little fingers and continued, but I knew I had to help my father take care of my brothers and sisters. That's what my mother would have wanted. I'm sorry we have no special mustard seed for you. And so Kisa Gautami continued to the next house and then to another, asking for a single mustard seed. But always someone had lost a beloved brother or sister or grandparent or aunt or cousin, mother, father. The list grew longer and longer. After a time, nightfall came. Kisa Gautami sat down, resting against a tree. She gazed down at her son in her arms. Studying him closely, she felt a gradual change in herself. Not a single household she had visited today lived untouched by death's sad hand. Many suffered as she did. She was not alone. And somehow, with these thoughts, her grief lightened just a bit, and she returned home. The next day at first light, Kisa Gautami readied her son for his funeral. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she wrapped him in clean cloth and said farewell. After the funeral, Kisa Gautami went back to the monastery to speak with the Buddha. He asked, Gautami, did you bring me a tiny grain of mustard? No, teacher. I am done looking for the mustard seed. I know that in the whole city, in the whole world, there is not one family, not one person free from the certainty of death. It is the way of all living things. We must at some time leave one another. I felt terribly alone in my grief, but now I know there are many others who have lost what they most cherished. We must help each other as you have helped me. Kisa Gautami, from that day forward, became a very wise and compassionate woman. From her experience, she was able to comfort many, many others in her lifetime. And thus ends our story. Let's sing our children and youth and facilitators off to their religious education classes.
Do you like my necklace?
I do like your necklace. use this one. Here we are gathered together on this beautiful morning, about 120, 110 people here in this room and 25 households on Zoom. Let's pause for a moment of prayer and meditation. Find a comfortable seat, feeling rooted and grounded here in this space. Take a few deep breaths and notice the nature and depth and speed of your breath as we open ourselves up to the spirit of life that is moving within and among us. Breathing in peace and breathing out love. This morning we hold so much gratitude for the sunshine, the changing of the seasons, the connections and warmth we feel within ourselves, within our families, between friends and loved ones, fellow congregants here, our neighbors and citizens of this city, and citizens of our bigger global community. And this morning we know and acknowledge that we also all need help and support. Some of us are struggling with addictions, broken relationships, loneliness, disease. Some of us struggle with health, whether that's mental, physical, emotional, or spiritual. And this morning, we meditate on and pray for relief, comfort, ease, that deeper sense of connection binding us together, knowing we're not alone. We marvel at the beauty of this moment. Amidst all the stardust and galaxies, here we are, breathing and living life together. This morning, we hold especially in light and in love Kate Vandeveld and her family as they navigate pain and old hurts. Anyone raising children and the struggles that come with this responsibility. We pray for the peace of Jerusalem. And we also send our thoughts of support to Myron Andes, a former member of this congregation who has also served as a UU minister in Canada and Bloomington, Minnesota. Myron is in Center Point Medical Center in Independence, Missouri, as he stabilizes from a heart condition. He hopes to return home to Minnesota within the next few weeks. We know that this community of people gathered together in this moment have many more concerns than just the ones named. I invite you now to speak out loud the names of those you are holding in your heart and in your mind this morning. Knowing that together we're more able to hold this all than we can alone. May it be so and make it so. Amen. Please remain seated for hymn number 1009, Meditation on Breathing. If you need the lyrics, they're in the teal hymnal. There are 3 parts. Feel free to sing along to the ones that grab you. Breathe in peace when I breathe out. I'll breathe out love when I breathe in. I'll breathe in peace when I breathe out. I'll breathe out love. Breathe in, breathe out, breathe in. Breathe out, breathe in, breathe out,
This is the moment in the service when we practice gratitude and support in the form of giving to our offering plate. The funds given here support the programs and sustenance of this church community. It enables us to pay our staff and guest musicians fairly and continue the work in the world that we hope to accomplish. There are a couple ways you can give today. You can use the text to give feature. The number is in your order of service. You can give on the website, or you can place cash or check in the offertory basket. Thank you for your generosity and your faith in this life we live together. The offering will now be gratefully collected.
Our first reading this morning is from James Baldwin. For nothing is fixed, forever and forever and forever, it is not fixed. The earth is always shifting, the light is always changing, the sea does not cease to grind down rock. Generations do not cease to be born, and we are responsible to them because we are the only witnesses they have. The sea rises, the light fails, lovers cling to each other, and children cling to us. The moment we cease to hold each other, the moment we break faith with one another, the sea engulfs us and the light goes out. Our second reading is from Nick Cave in his interview with Krista Tippett on the On Being podcast back in November. The sense of yearning, the sense of being tethered to the earth but reaching beyond ourselves in some kind of way is the story, I think, of everyone in a way. I think that most people have that feeling and a kind of lostness, I would say, an incompleteness and the need for something beyond ourselves to make sense of things. It feels to me that loss is our universal state as human beings. I disagree with sort of the grief club and the club no one wants to join. I think humanity itself is that club, and we are all feeling these senses of loss, whether it's directly personal, it's bred into us, that sense of yearning. And that's not a failure, it's a condition. It's our condition. And I think that if we're honest with ourselves, most people think this way, feel this way, a sense of lostness about things and a need for something beyond that. That's my defense of religion, I guess. Thank you so much for your music. So a couple of times each year, I try to make it a point to ask the children and youth in our congregation why it is they come to church. It might not totally surprise you to learn that cookies is probably the #1 most consistent response I have gotten from the kids in both of the congregations I have served over the years that I've been doing this work. To be fair, I'm sure cookies makes some of your lists as well. I know it's on mine. The #2 answer is probably, my parents make me. And this is also totally fair. This probably would have been my answer when I was a kid as well. And I've learned over the years to not take this response quite so personally, and knowing that kids generally feel a little more than powerless when it comes to the decisions of the day-to-day activities of their families, and they will not miss an opportunity to name that when asked. And I can tell you, to the other parents out there, as a parent myself, I can tell you that my kids also complain when I make them go to church, but also when I make them go to places like the zoo and the park and other places that I know they genuinely enjoy. But really, the reasons our children and youth name about why they come here are just as varied as they are for adults. They have friends here. They like the music. They get to play when they're here. We talk about being kind, we love people for who they are, and sometimes they simply say, I come here because this is my church. So when I asked this question just a few weeks ago, I was floored when I had more than the usual number of kids tell me that they come here because this is a place where they can bring their big feelings. One of our kids even commented, I come here because I know I can have an emotional meltdown here, and I can't do that at school. And this is highly relatable, right? We don't have many spaces where we are explicitly invited to bring in our deepest griefs, our biggest joys, and our worries that we might be just a little lost. Now, I have to tell you, and some of you might be surprised by this, especially if you know that I was raised Unitarian Universalist. I am raising my own children Unitarian Universalist, and my work is as a UU religious educator. But I am deeply, deeply skeptical about church. I sometimes wrestle with religious language. I spend a lot of time thinking about issues around power dynamics and authority in institutions, and I really question whether organized religion has been a force for good in our world. And yes, I'm also talking about Unitarian Universalist institutions when I'm talking about this questioning as well. I ask this question, why church, of our children and youth and of all of you, in part because I am always sitting with that very same question. Why church? Does what we do here matter? Does organized religion in general offer something good in the world that we cannot find somewhere else? I'm willing to bet that a good many of you have wrestled with these same questions, and I'm so glad that we get to hold them together. I actually think that this skepticism is a really important way to help us hold our work and our community with great intention, humility, and care. Those of us who are church skeptics are not at all alone. It is no secret that church attendance in Unitarian Universalist congregations, and in fact across all denominations, is trending down. You may have seen reports that in the last 10 years or so about the rise of the nuns, or the sharp increase in the number of people who would check the none of the above box on the surveys when asked about religious identity. Casper ter Kuile, in his book, The Power of Ritual, Turning Everyday Activities into Soulful Rituals, explains the cultural shift away from religious communities. 50 years ago, he says, most people in the United States relied on a single religious community to offer connection, conduct spiritual practices, ritualize life moments, foster healing, connect to lineage, inspire morality, house transcendent experience, mark holidays, support family, serve the needy, work for justice, and through art, song, text, and speech, tell and retell common story to bind them together. And it's true, how and where we seek connection in our society has changed drastically in the last 50 years. Everything about our world has changed drastically in the last 50 years, so why wouldn't the way we gather? Turkyle, as a part of his work with the Sacred Design Lab, studied the communities that people are turning to in droves to meet these spiritual needs. Communities like CrossFit, dinner parties, and even summer camps for adults. He tells stories about how these communities have offered deep care for one another, members cooking meals for one another, and coaches taking phone calls from group members looking for emotional support, groups taking up collections to help others when finances are tight. And I would bet that if we ask those who have chosen these secular communities why they have chosen them, that we would find some of the very same answers that you all have for gathering here. In fact, Turkyle identifies these common trends in why they say they gather, 6 of them: community, personal transformation, social transformation, purpose finding, creativity, and accountability. Now, I think there's a couple really important points here in his findings. 1, even in the midst of a world that has changed drastically, there are some deep human needs that stay the same. We all want to feel seen, connected, and supported. And on the whole, I agree with Turkyle's assessment that it is not terrible that we as a society are looking for different ways to meet our spiritual and community needs. 2, I think it's probably important and good to be part of multiple groups where we can find connection, fulfillment, and growth. And I say this in part in case you all were sitting there thinking that I was telling you to take your skepticism and quit church and join CrossFit. That's not what I'm saying. We contain multitudes, so you can be a church skeptic who attends church and belong to CrossFit. Both things can be true. But whatever communities we choose, we should hold them all with humility, intention, and care. 3, something is missing. In all the case studies of all of the groups that people are flocking to meet their spiritual needs, I did not see one explicit invitation to cultivate an intergenerational community. Even in the summer camp for adults, which was created to meet the desire for, quote, childlike creativity, play, and fun, it is not for children. And so, all this to say, if you are sitting there wondering why, in all of my skepticism, why it is I do what I do for work, why I keep saying yes to church, what I keep coming back to is that religious communities are one of the very few places in our society where we still gather in intentionally intergenerational communities. I do this work because all of us, of all ages, need intentional space to do the same ancient thing that humans have been doing since the beginning of time: to find connection, conduct spiritual practices, ritualize life moments, work for justice, tell and retell common stories that bind us together, to have space to bring our skepticism and our big feelings, to wrestle with big questions together in community, to find others who share experiences of loss and grief and joy, to be fully seen and celebrated as we break bread and sometimes cookies together, and to have a safe place to shed the tears that might not be welcome in school or at work or even at home. In the words of Nick Cave, this is my defense of religion, I guess. Another quick story. I recently came across one of my first annual reports I wrote way back in 2005 for the congregation I served in Flint, Michigan. We were in the midst of a lead minister transition, and I had been in my work as a religious educator for all of a year and a half. This was also a time of rebuilding a program for children and youth in Flint, and there had been a lot of conversation about how to be more welcoming to children, youth, and their families. Many were struggling with the idea of having a story as part of the worship service every week or even once a month, and some didn't think that children should spend any time in worship at all. Now, some of you that have spent any time talking to me at all know that being explicitly welcoming to children in our worship services is a hill I will absolutely and very stubbornly die on. I knew that many of my peers had left UU churches because they simply had no other experience of community than their religious education circles. So once they bridged out of youth group, they simply had no connection left in their church communities. At the same time, I was also struggling to find the volunteers I needed to offer circles for children and youth, and I was desperately trying to recruit those who did not currently have kids in the program to help with these circles. I did this then, and I try to do this now for a couple of reasons. Because it is really, really easy for children, youth, and families to disappear and become siloed in congregations. It is often assumed that it is the responsibility of those actively parenting to lead our programs for children and youth. And since the circles typically meet during the service, parents are not able to as actively engage in the other parts of the life of the congregation. And if parents are facilitating these circles for their kids might not get to know that actually real, live Unitarian Universalist adults do exist in the world who are not related to them. It is truly a gift for children, youth, and their parents, and those who facilitate these small groups to build an intergenerational with people who are not related to them. A religious education program, I said in my report, cannot survive without the support of the entire congregation, and I wrote entire in bold and in all caps. While we have come so far in our efforts to become more intentionally welcoming to our children and youth and inviting them to feel like they are a part of the community, there is still much more we can do. As much as things have changed since 2005, I did not have internet in my office when I first started in 2004. I'm here to bring you that exact same message that I brought to Flint, but with a little more urgency. This congregation indeed does do so much to make it clear that we celebrate children, youth, and their families. We have done such great work here holding space for children and youth in our adult-centered spaces. We have a soul work center in our sanctuary for anyone of any age that needs a little movement to feel more a part of worship. We often switch up our worship services to be a little more interactive. We invite youth voices to be a part of our worship teams, and our youth-led service will be in just a few weeks. I hope you all will come. Our Wednesday night meals provide opportunities for parents to connect with one another and with those in our community who are not actively parenting. And we still have lots of work to do. I think it's important here to name a couple of trends that I have been seeing post-pandemic, and parents in the room, you all can correct me later if I'm wrong about any of these points. One, parents are utterly exhausted. Amen. Still, the isolation of the pandemic led directly back into extremely busy lives, and they are feeling under-resourced and under-supported. Two, our children are struggling. There was a real loss of skill building during the isolation of the pandemic, and the relationship between parents and children suffered as parents became full-time caretakers, teachers, therapists, and so much more to our kids. And right now, I am hearing loud and clear from families with young children a deep desire to intentionally push back against rugged individualism and build a sustaining community for them and their children. Because we have learned that none of us can do this alone. We are living in a time and in a society that so clearly values individualism over community, even in our quests for a deeper spiritual life. And it is hurting all of us. And Unitarian Universalism is particularly susceptible to an individualistic approach to spirituality. It can be easy to forget that while we might be all on our own individual journeys, our journeys are so enhanced and made better when we're doing it together. We all have so much wisdom to share with one another at every stage of life. We are also living in a time where we are witnessing the rise of nationalism, continued violence in our schools, attacks on the rights of trans kids, and our kids are inundated with news and reels and algorithms on social media. Our kids desperately need a safe place to land where they can be themselves, feel seen and celebrated, and explore the questions alongside people who are willing to risk journeying together. And so we, the grown-ups here, need to work on leaning into child and youth-centered spaces. The small group experience for children and youth is a very important one. It allows them to connect on a more personal level with one another and with those who facilitate the circles. They do the hard work of covenant, and just like small groups for adults, these circles are not always neat and tidy or easy, but they are deeply rewarding. And we are desperately needing the help of all of you, the entire congregation, to make it happen. And so I encourage you in the next couple of weeks to consider signing up to help facilitate these groups for our children and youth. We provide training and materials, and truly the most important thing you can offer our young people and their families is your presence. You can come into these circles just as you come into this space with an open heart and an open mind. As James Baldwin reminds us, generations do not cease to be born, and we are responsible to them because we are the only witnesses they have. The benefits of intergenerational communities and relationships are so clear. Intergenerational connections bring with them cognitive benefits for all ages, a decrease in isolation for all ages and for their caretakers, an increase in self-esteem, a greater sense of belonging, and a greater understanding of those who have different life experiences from us. And for me personally, I don't know that I could even name for you all of the ways that intergenerational community has impacted me as a child and as a teenager and now as an adult. It is these relationships that brings my skeptical heart back to church again and again and again. These intergenerational connections may even be the reason why you do church. I truly believe that intergenerational community is an act of resistance. As Bell Hooks reminds us, communities sustain life, not nuclear families or the couple, and certainly not the rugged individualist. There is no better way to learn the art of loving than in community. May it be so. I invite you all to rise in body or spirit for hymn 1017, Building a New Way.
Please join me in the closing words. May peace dwell within our hearts and understanding in our minds. May courage steel our will and the love of truth forever guide us.